This podcast has been produced on the traditional lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples. From 2RPH and the Wicking Trust, this is Passing Thoughts. I'm Rob Caldor. This is the podcast where we explore death, dying, and everything in between. Later in this episode, we'll take a look at the Jamaican 9 Nights Wake celebration, so stay with us until the end. But first, we often think about the legacy we leave behind, what we pass on and how we are remembered. But what if that legacy could do more than just exist? What if it could keep speaking? Imagine a world where a digital version of you, a Griefbot, could continue to interact with your family and friends long after you've gone. Connie Mason joins us to dive deep into this idea.
Many of us talk to people we know after they've died, sometimes quietly in our thoughts, perhaps by the graveside, or a place of remembrance. We might ask advice or guidance, share a precious moment, or share how much they're missed. Chris Williams believes there are many reasons and also a strong desire to communicate with loved ones after death, and his company, Afterlife AI, provides the opportunity for us to do just that by creating our own Griefbot. Chris, what's a Griefbot?
A Griefbot really is a way for someone to replicate a loved one after they've gone. And that can be done through audio, video, uploading certain documents that is communication from that person, and it replicates their personality. But what we've done with Afterlife AI is different to a traditional Griefbot. The important parameters here is that the user, while still alive or still around, is obviously able to manage this process themselves. So they consciously, with consent and in a controlled private environment, actually replicate themselves through communication. It can be audio to text, video, photos, etc. And that gives them the opportunity to replicate themselves today for future planning purposes. And I think the difference here is that the Afterlife AI platform is designed really around the user today, not so much the family thereafter. The benefit here is that the personality would stop growing when the person passes. And that personality can only communicate, or the persona, I should say, can only communicate to trusted contacts. And what do I mean by trusted contacts? They're people that the user nominates today with consent as far as who the persona will be able to communicate with. And that could be mum and sister, could be children, could be anyone, nieces, nephews, it could be any person. But that is determined up front.
So Griefbots can also be referred to as deathbots or digital twins. So what inspired you to come up with this idea for what you call a non-traditional Griefbot?
It's a very primitive instinct. I think people want to leave a legacy or a sense of identity or a sense of purpose translated after they're gone. And I think towards the latter stage of life or in that planning process, you start to think a little bit differently. It becomes a bit more apparent to you that it's important how you're viewed afterlife, or it's important how you're able to leave messages or communicate with loved ones, or even potentially support and care for them. I think that is a primitive need that's in most people, generally speaking. But I think importantly is that the technology, artificial intelligence, is obviously developed at a rate of knots. So for a mum and dad or a user, the trust in artificial intelligence is growing rapidly. And I think even over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen a significant uptake in that trust.
Let's say I did want to leave a legacy, a digital legacy for my family. Can you walk me through the process?
So the process starts with what we call a WOW onboarding persona setup. And effectively, the success of the platform from an early engagement perspective really is dictated by what we call the WOW principle. And that is within 5 to 10 minutes, the persona communicates back to you in a way that wows you, either tears or laughter, that's so resonant with your personality. What we do is we ask some high level questions about you as a person, what's important to you in your life, and we'll quickly identify, or the AI will quickly identify areas that resonate with you. And that could be children, that could be pets, that could be a legacy, a career legacy, that could be any number of things. And once the user shows a keen interest and a strong gravitation towards a particular topic, we go quite deep on that. And we're able to generate thousands, if not millions, of data points on the persona to actually then begin replicating effectively.
What do you mean by that? Can you explain that?
So the questions might be, for example, what would you say to your daughter on her wedding day? Or what are three things that are most important to you that you want people to remember you by? What are five lessons that you would like your children to know if you could tell them in 10 years' time? There's different sort of questions like that will show the answers from the user will demonstrate what's important to them in life. And then through that journey, the artificial intelligence will go deeper and ask further questions about that. So there'll be second and third and fourth stage questions. Now that's initially, but then thereafter, the persona is created through ongoing discussions. That can be written text, audio to text. So for those that maybe aren't able to type or can't type quickly, they can speak directly to the persona builder. They can upload videos as well. And from those videos, the artificial intelligence can gain knowledge about the relationships between the people in the video or photos as well. And for an example, in a photo, it might be a person with their parent or a person with their child. And the data that we can extract from that photo to help build the persona replica might be the interaction between those people. It might be the way that someone's standing, their body language. There's so much data that we can actually generate through this interaction to get these millions of data points to replicate the persona. Now, that journey doesn't stop after that persona is built effectively. It continues on. It's not just a sort of set and forget process. And the benefit here is that for particular people, if they're towards the end of life, they might be feeling a little bit lonely, other sorts of feelings that are challenging. Having the ability to speak to that persona in some respects is quite therapeutic because it understands them and it's a very strong reflection of them. And we like to refer to it as the best version of yourself. So, what that means is out of the average 30 days, you might be feeling great. 21 days, 3 or 4 days, you might be tired and feeling okay. And a few days, you may not be feeling great. And what this persona is designed to do is really capture the best version of yourself. So, it can also then continue as a mentor or as a guide, and you continue interacting with that persona until you're no longer here. And through that process, the persona just gets even more and more accurate and reflective of you as a person.
How long would I have to spend to create my persona?
So initially, around about 10 minutes to 15 minutes is going to get us a relatively high level, a reasonably accurate reflection. That's the magic of the technology that we have today and the uniqueness of the product. And I think also doing this in a preparation methodology as opposed to the family doing it retrospectively, I think that's a really important difference for this product and really is a world first.
So, do you get to check in with your bot afterwards to feel comfortable that it is, in fact, representing you as you believe is the true image of yourself, the true persona?
So there is a thing called persona drift management. So in the event the persona deviates from what it should be, either we would pick that up or the user would be able to basically reply or click a dislike to a particular communication and that would trigger in the system that doesn't reflect from the user's perspective. So obviously it's not perfect, but it is a working iteration. And once those data points are truly accepted by the user and form part of that persona, that's when we can really go deeper and widen the persona depth.
Okay, so I've got a few questions around control of my digital image. Can anyone else make changes?
No, no, and that's a really important aspect. Since the product has been launched into market organically, we've actually had quite a few segments on television, online media. Quite a few people have actually reached out to me personally and to the business and actually said, fortunately, I had a loved one pass away. Are you able to replicate them? And as a business, we unfortunately need to say, no, no, we can't do that. It's not what we're designed for. It's not part of what we do. So the point, just to get back to your question here, is can anyone make changes to your personality? No, they can't. And the way that we structure that is by a trademarked product called Executor Lock that sits within Afterlife AI. And that Executor Lock As soon as the user passes away, the executor lock method would kick in. And what that does is it prevents the personality from growing any further. What I mean by that is it is confined to personality that was as at the day that the app implemented executor lock. Now, that doesn't mean that the personality will stop growing to some degree, and the foundational memory and the foundational personality will not change. But things such as if that personality communicates with its partner, its life partner, and finds out that someone got married or someone passed away, those sort of items would update into the shorter term memory because they're life events, but the foundational personality will not change. And I think that's really important. And just to expand there from the executive lock process, you've also got what we term trusted contacts. And those trusted contacts are the only people that are able to communicate with the persona, and they are nominated and predetermined by the user prior to any interaction. So it may be that the user allows or approves for the persona to speak to one person, five people, but that is determined precisely by the user. And I think that's a very important point.
Can the bot or the persona be used for any other purpose?
The persona can be used for other purposes. And I think this is where what we're discussing today really is I suppose, the core use case for the product. But if you cast your mind forward a couple of years from now, where the uptake and prevalence of this technology will be growing and significantly larger, regulation and laws perhaps evolving as well, we foresee, we're planning for, and we're building in the background, and you can already have it indirectly, but in a more formal process where a persona could actually contribute to estate management or wealth management for the family trust, or provide input perhaps into how a will should be allocated. Now, obviously, there are still regulations and laws that dictate that a will must be signed by a living person, witnessed by a solicitor, and there's a strict regime around that. However, in the event there is, for an example, a will dispute, and an interesting data point came out only a week ago or a few days ago, where will disputes in New South Wales alone, I believe, are up 700% in the last 3 or 5 years. And it comes down to ambiguity. And I think if a persona is very accurate and reflective, and if the user has made the conscious decision to also implement, not provide the full will, but instructions of how they want their assets to be allocated or specific decisions on that, I believe that's quite a useful data point in the event there's perhaps a dispute, or even further, it could actually be used as the core basis for that. I think there's a couple of important perspectives there: wealth management, managing estates, but there's also other items here. Let's say, for example, the user is a professor or a lecturer at university. What's to say that that user can't monetize their persona to continue doing lectures, one-on-one tutoring, or any other sort of interaction there as well? I think that's a concept that is firmly captured by the product. And there are others as well. I mean, we've got, as a business, more than 60 patents pending currently. So I think what we're discussing today really is the tip of the iceberg. There are wider uses here as well. The use cases determined by the user will be those that are only available at that point in time.
Anticipating those wider uses, will at the point that you're producing your bot, will you have the opportunity to approve or disapprove your bot to be used?
So, as an app, as a business, we would not retrospectively apply a user's personality to a use case that didn't apply to that person while they were around. That's a critical element here, that you have full consent, control, privacy of how and when and why your persona is used and what you've consented to. I think that's the simplest way of explaining it. It will only be used or interact with those in a manner that you've already consented to.
And who owns my image?
Your image is owned under a framework by yourself, but through the trusted contacts. So they are able to obviously pause or stop the persona at their discretion. So I suppose that is a transitional process. But up until the point where the user is around, obviously full ownership, and then thereafter it is controlled process handled by the trusted contact.
And what about your fee structure? Have you got a basic model or a more sophisticated bot available for those that might want it?
Yeah, so the fee structure is incredibly low for what the technology offers. I mean, a couple of years ago, this would have been 20 or $50,000. It's effectively $15 per month for the lead-in package, and that is limited only by audio and video upload data size and how many interactions either the user or the trusted contact can have with that personality. So it's limited to interactions and data. The larger plan is $39 per month. And effectively, that is, I suppose, almost an unlimited with a fair use policy plan that allows almost unlimited communication and data storage, videos, photos, etc., to get the best likeness of that person.
What about if my grief bot goes rogue and starts to act contrary to my persona? And I'm thinking about if it were to give some misplaced advice to someone which had harmful effects, who would bear the responsibility for that?
It's so obviously at the point of entering into the persona creation, the user would enter into would accept certain terms and conditions, as would the trusted contact user. But I think to answer your question more effectively there, without sort of deviating from it, we have implemented in stage two, so very shortly after the launch, individual agents that actually manage, and agents are artificial intelligence that manage persona drift. They're continuously analyzing if there is a deviation from the core persona that has already been created. There are other more sensitive topics where particular keywords, for an example, and this one is something that perhaps is not spoken about enough, but for example, if the word suicide is used, hypothetically, that would initiate a complete lockdown of the application almost effectively with automated communication going out suggesting certain lifeline, etc. So there are different methods that are being put in place or have been put in place to mitigate those sorts of risks, to prevent persona drift and to prevent situations of harm. The other one that I think is a relevant question that is commonly received is what happens in the event that it may not help the grieving process in that it prolongs that process? And I think that's a valid question as well. The position that we have as a software, as an artificial intelligence and a business is that this product is not for everyone today. But what we've done is designed a product that we're really confident ticks the box for 80% of people and delivers a really strong outcome. I think to have a product that is perfect across the entire board or that ticks everyone's ethical or risk boundaries is not really possible.
You mentioned ethics. There aren't any mandatory standards at the moment. So, what do you think are the main ethical concerns that do need to be addressed when you are creating an image of, well, a human being?
Firstly, consent. And I think that's the biggest one that we've touched on. That's critical. So you're in a very different category if it's done retrospectively after someone's passed away and it's done by a family member or an ex-partner or a child. That's a very different scenario than done today by yourself. So consent, number one. Number two, privacy. I think one of the concerns with artificial intelligence is that data that you share or those communications are provided or uploaded to the cloud. The way that we've handled this internally and the way that the product is structured is that if, for example, you upload a video or a photo, the processing of that photo or video is done locally. And what we then do is derive those data points from that photo or video. And those data points determine the persona. And then that persona is interacted with artificial intelligence, not the raw documents themselves. So that ticks, I think, the privacy item. We've touched on, I think, grieving. I think that's an ethical concern that we believe we put in place boundaries. However, as the product evolves, we expect that those methods will improve with the autonomous agents, etc. We've touched on the potential for self harm, and we have in place very strong controls around that. And I think where the regulatory or other ethical viewpoints occur is then on the other side, what limitations, what can this persona decide in today's society, or how much credibility is the persona to be given? And I think that's the point that's going to change rapidly and evolve. I foresee that perhaps in 5 or 10 years' time, and almost as more of a defensive process, the personality may be provided its own sort of ID to an extent that is the sole source of that personality for that particular person, to avoid what we believe the issue of everyone's got so much data and photos and videos on the internet, publicly available information that actually provides an opportunity for someone to do this without consent. And I think that's a really important point that we've designed around today and forms part of the strategy with our pending patents as well.
I'm presuming there's an age limit. It's for adults. Is it over 18?
Yes, over 8, and also verified identity checks at the point of the user registration.
When I first heard about Griefbots, I must admit to feeling rather squeamish about creating one for my family, but I eventually did warm to the idea and I decided to talk to my family and ask what they thought. My husband and I talk a fair bit about end of life because it's not that far away for us, so we're used to the topic, and he thought it was a good idea. I'm not sure he didn't want to just have reassurance that he'd be able to find out how to work the washing machine when I was gone. My eldest daughter was quite uncomfortable about it because she's not in a space where she feels good about talking about my demise, so she wanted to think about it. But my youngest daughter had an interesting point which you've raised, and it was about grieving. Would it help us to find healing, or would we hold on too long? This is new technology. We're on the cusp. And these are the sort of important questions that we don't really know the answer to.
If this didn't make us feel a little bit squeamish initially, I think that would be a concern in and of itself. I think we are speaking about a very sensitive topic that is to some extent a little bit taboo in certain cultures, in particular, I think in Western cultures or Australia, where it's an uncomfortable conversation. And as you mentioned, speaking to your husband, it's a little bit more of an open discussion, maybe more relevant. And then the comment around the washing machine, I think is fantastic. And I do believe there are risks associated with the grieving process as well. However, by and large, we believe that there is more upside here, and particularly for those that it works very well. And I think the advancement of technology, artificial intelligence right now, the speed at which that is developing is absolutely unprecedented. And this puts the industrial revolution to shame. What we're seeing at the moment is, to be quite frank, is crazy. So I think it's not so much a case of does it work today, but is there an inevitability point somewhere? When is that? And how do we start planning for that today? And as different demographics and groups in society start to become more comfortable with that, I think that will change over time.
One of the big questions for me is, if we're replicating our loved ones in a digital image, is there a chance that we could actually devalue what characterizes us as a human being?
It's a very important philosophical question. What I would say in response to that is we are learning as humans, as business, as artificial intelligence. And I think it's something that is very exciting as it evolves. But I think it's something that's also, we can't be ignorant, and we need to understand and learn. Watch very carefully as this technology evolves to make sure that we've got it right, or as best as we can, as I keep saying, for that 80% of people.
Thanks to Chris Williams from Afterlife AI. I have no doubt we'll hear a lot more from him and his bot. And of course, thanks to Connie Mason for diving deep into this topic. Before we go, I recently came across the concept of the Jamaican 9 Nights ritual and wanted to find out more. After going down a few online rabbit holes, I came across Dr. Prudencia Dixon. Hello, is that Prudencia?
It is Prudencia.
She wrote her PhD thesis on the 9 Nights ritual. Tell me about the 9 Nights mourning process.
It's a purely African-based ritual.
So it essentially travelled with slavery to Jamaica.
Yes. As many of the way the rituals are interpreted in Jamaica, it's a synthesis of both Western Christian culture and African culture. It is really about making sure the spirit transitions well to the land of the ancestors, and that they are well disposed for the role that they're going to continue to have in your life, and that they will look kindly on you once they have got on the ninth night. So the burial would happen most often before 8 o'clock in the morning, very often be within the family grounds, often right next to the house. And then the intervening days would be providing support to the family, going to see them. So from the day of death to the ninth day, the bereaved household is open house. It's usually referred to as the dead yard. People from the community would go and visit them, just offering support, whatever, physical, psychological, financial, you'd bring food and whatever you could to support the family. And then on the ninth night, you would have this celebration. It was celebrating the deceased life and assisting the spirit of the deceased on its final resting place. And it also marked the end of the grieving period. So friends and members of the community would gather at the home of the deceased. The first thing you would notice when you went there would be a white table. It's called the duppy table. Now, I don't know if you know much about Jamaican culture, but duppies are ghosts. There would be a duppy table, which would be covered in a white tablecloth. And on this table would be lots of things that represented the life of the person. There'd be artifacts of the person's work. There'd be quite often a Bible to represent the religion. There would be food. There would be items that represented the person. And then there would be food. But the food would represent the sustenance the spirit needed to be able to make the journey into the other world properly. So they'd be like bammies and fish and hard-or bread, specific types of food, sometimes fruit and drink and occasionally flowers. And it would be beautifully laid out because the intention was that anyone attending would need to come and have a look and marvel at how well it had been laid out. The food on the table would be for eating later, but not until after midnight. It couldn't be touched till after midnight because it was deemed that at midnight, the spirit would pass through, take what it needed, and go on its way. And only after that could the people present partake of that food. There would be all kinds of games. There would be music. There would be dancing. There would be a lot of rum would be drunk. The first part would be like an acknowledgement of why they were there. The whole event would kick off with a libation, with a rum libation poured to the receiving ancestors. So pour it on the ground, acknowledging that a new person was coming and that their passage would be welcome. And there would also be food. There'd be like curry goat and rice and chicken and stuff. And that food would be eaten throughout the night up until midnight. But the food on the table couldn't be touched till after midnight. So it would be like a big party. The purpose of this big party was to help the deceased on its way, but also the culmination of the grieving period and a big celebration of the person's life. And it was the release of all of the grieving tension that had been held over the 9 nights.
If you want to find out more about Jamaican death rituals, there is a link to Dr. Prudencia Dixon's book in the show notes. Quite an episode we've had today. I'm not sure how I feel about a bot keeping a digital version of myself around for eternity, but I do know that I'm a big fan of the Jamaican 9-night ritual. No doubt the mourners would get a sense of closure, accompanied by a corker of a hangover. Passing Thoughts is made with the funding provided by the Wicking Trust and the invaluable support from the team at 2RPH. If you have feedback, topic suggestions, want to share your own experience, email us at passingthoughts@2rph.org.au. Don't forget to rate and review Passing Thoughts. It helps others find the show. From 2RPH, thanks for listening to Passing Thoughts.
This is a Radio 2RPH production.